The cell door slammed. A boot hit the edge. Her wrist twisted in his grip. The key scraped but missed the lock. A rifle stock cracked the window. He ducked. Glass sprayed his face. She kicked. He slipped back. The lantern tipped. Flame caught the straw. A low war cry rose outside. He looked up. Dozens moved through the street. One lit an arrow. It flew. It struck the roof. The fire spread. She yanked the keys again. He grabbed her belt. The front door shook. The hinges cracked. A shadow stepped into the smoke, raised a hatchet, and moved forward fast. The sheriff slammed the cell door shut with both hands and pressed his back against it. His ribs ached from the girl's boot. His knuckles were skinned raw. Smoke still clung to his shirt. The flame in the lantern had been stomped out, but heat lingered in the stone. He looked through the bars. She had sat again, same way as before, straight spine hands resting on her knees, eyes on nothing, hair tied back with rawhide cord, 3 loops, 2 black, 1 white. His stomach turned. He had seen that braid before. The sound of gunfire came back to him all at once, younger hands trembling on a long rifle. He had fired into the smoke. Someone yelled his name. He had stepped through the ash of a burnt bedroll, and she had been there. Not this girl, but one with the same cord in her hair, a child bent over a mound of earth. She had not cried either. He wiped his face. The sweat tasted of iron and regret. Boots outside scraped the dust, chatter low and rising. A woman's voice said something about the girl's hands. A man muttered about law. Another mentioned the army. He pulled away from the door, stepped back into the main room, picked up the badge that had fallen during the struggle. The edges were dented. He stared at the star, then tossed it onto the desk. He unlatched the front shutter and looked through the bars. The general store's lanterns were still lit. A few men stood with rifles in hand. One pointed at the jail. The sheriff closed the shutter again. He rubbed the back of his neck. The scar. There was still tender old blade, old fight. Apache again. But not this girl. She was younger. Her nails were clean. Her tunic was stitched with glass beads. Not military issue. Not stolen. He turned slowly and walked back to her cell. The girl looked up. He met her eyes, dark as burned stone. Still no fear, just something heavy behind them, something buried. He crouched beside the bars, looked closer at the braid. White meant loss, not death, not always. Maybe a brother, maybe a sister, maybe the girl who had knelt in the smoke all those years ago. He stood again. Voices outside grew louder. Now there were more footsteps, shuffling one boot, dragging slightly. He walked to the front of the jail, opened the small lookout slit, and froze. Lines of fire in the hills, dozens, flickering, unmoving, watching. He closed the slit, barred it with the iron bolt. The girl had not moved, but she was not alone anymore. At sunrise, the rooftops filled with silhouettes, still silent. Some crouched with rifles across their knees. Some lay flat and watched through glass scopes. One shape sat smaller than the rest. A child. No weapon, just wide eyes, and a thin bone necklace that shifted in the wind. The sheriff stood at the barred front window, jaw set, fingers tight around the iron sill. He counted 7 on the south ridge, 5 to the west, more behind the livery, all within range. Boot steps slammed behind him. The deputy stormed in, sweat already through his shirt, hands shaking as he loaded shells into a long iron revolver. He shouted and pointed at the cell. Said they had to move her. Said it was suicide to wait. The sheriff did not raise his voice. He turned, spoke quiet, said if she walks out now, she will not make it to the end of the street. Neither will we. The deputy cursed, stalked back outside. The crowd waited beyond the porch. More had come since nightfall. Store owners, stable hands, mothers with eyes wide and mouths shut. A preacher stood near the pump well. He held a Bible, did not open it. They spoke in clusters. One man raised a hand toward the hill. Another pointed at the jail. A woman cried out that her son had gone missing near the river the week before. Someone else said the girl was a thief. Others argued she had not spoken a word. The mayor arrived. He looked sick, hat in hand, asked the sheriff how long this would last. Sheriff did not answer. He watched the rooftops again, then stepped back inside. The girl had not moved. She sat with her back straight, hair still braided tight. She had pulled her knees closer now, hands folded around her ankles. No fear on her face, no ease either. Only stillness. Hoofbeats came down the main road, slow, deliberate. The sheriff stepped outside. Dust rose around the hooves. The rider wore a light hide shirt. No weapon. No visible mark of rank. He stopped just short of the porch. Dismounted, reached into his saddlebag, pulled out a cloth-wrapped bundle and set it on the ground. He did not step closer. Sheriff walked forward, unwrapped the cloth, a piece of wood inside, carved and painted. Lines etched in red clay. He turned it over. 3 words burned into the base, not in English, but he could read them. He stood up, cloth in hand. The deputy stepped beside him again, said they should answer with rifles. Said the message was a threat. The sheriff looked down at the carving. Give her back. He walked past the deputy, back into the jail, barred the door again, sat behind the desk, hands on the wood. Outside, the voices rose again, but none dared step forward. The girl sat with her knees tucked tight and her back straight against the wall. The stone floor left dust on her skirt, but she did not move. Her palms rested flat beside her ankles, eyes open, breath even. She watched nothing, spoke nothing. Still had not made a sound since the cuffs closed around her wrists 2 days before. The sheriff sat across the room. He had kept watch through 2 shifts of light. He had written no report, had not opened the ledger. The badge still lay untouched beside the empty lantern. She had been taken outside the trading post. Old man Calhoun said he saw her pocket something shiny, said she walked slow and alone and too calm for someone honest, said she turned when he shouted, said she ran when others gathered, but no one had seen the theft, and the shopkeeper could not find anything missing. Still the mob came, still the rope had been thrown across the hitching post, still someone had grabbed her shoulder and shoved her to the ground. She did not resist, she did not scream. She only stood when told and walked with her head high. The sheriff had not spoken to her. Then only opened the cell, only turned the key, only waited as the lock clicked shut behind her. Now the morning sun cut through the bars and struck the dust in her hair. The door opened slow. The midwife's apprentice stepped in quiet. She held a bowl with both hands, corn mash, a canteen of water tied at her hip. She knelt beside the bars, pushed the bowl through. Waited, did not speak either. The girl looked at the food, then looked at the girl holding it. Both were young, no more than 17, both with sun-worn skin, but one wore cotton from town, and the other wore soft hide, marked with beads that shimmered faint in the light. The girl in the cell reached out. The apprentice flinched, then steadied. The hand touched her wrist, gently. The apprentice looked down. Thin, raised scars, half-healed, faint circles. 2 on each wrist, one faded on the left ankle. She knew what they were. Metal cuffs, government kind, used in schools where they taught silence and called it order. The girl did not press. She pulled her hand back, began to eat without looking away. The apprentice did not leave. She sat against the wall just outside the cell, legs drawn close, eyes on the floor. They stayed like that for a long time. No words, no movement, only the sound of the spoon scraping against the wood of the bowl. Then the sound changed. Not inside, outside. A low thrum, soft. Steady drums in the distance, not sharp, not rising, morning drums. Not calling for blood, but for memory. The girl paused, closed her eyes, touched the braid behind her neck. The beat kept going. The cell stayed still. The sun had climbed high by the time the elder appeared. He came walking alone. Bare feet pressing into the hot earth without pause. White cloth draped across his shoulders, loose and clean. No weapon. No words, only a steady gait and the wind behind him. He stopped at the edge of the square, 30 paces from the jail, did not step closer, did not raise his hands, only waited. The townsfolk gathered, quick men from the store, women from the saloon. Even the preacher stood still at the edge of the crowd. The sheriff watched from the porch, deputy at his side, the girl still in the cell, the drums still faint behind the hills. The elder reached into a worn leather satchel. Slow, deliberate. He drew out a small object, wrapped in soft brown cloth, kneeling. He unwrapped it on the dry ground, revealed a pendant, silver, simple oval, shaped with a red stone pressed into the center. It gleamed in the light, the same pendant the girl had been accused of stealing. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some stepped forward, others back. The elder looked at no one. He lifted the pendant in one hand, held it out, palm open. No trembling, no fear, only offering. The sheriff stepped off the porch, walked forward. Stopped at 10 paces, he looked at the pendant, then at the man, then back at the crowd. The murmurs grew louder. Some asked where it came from. Some shouted it proved nothing. Others turned their eyes away. The deputy cursed under his breath, shifted his stance, hand on his belt. The sheriff did not take the pendant. He said the law was broken. He said the girl had run. He said the arrest was already made. The elder spoke only once, his voice low but strong. He said the law was broken long ago. The wind carried it across the square. The sheriff held his ground, did not answer. The elder lowered his hand, wrapped the pendant again, stood turned, walked away. The same way he had come. The crowd remained, restless, cracking knuckles, tightening grips on belts and pockets. The deputy stepped close, said they should end this. Said it would not hold much longer. Said they should act while they still could. The sheriff turned, looked him in the eye, said nothing, just placed one hand on the deputy's wrist and pushed it gently away. That night, no one slept. The jail remained dark. The girl had laid down flat on the floor. Her hands folded beneath her head. The sheriff sat by the window, watching the fire pits across the hills had multiplied. So had the watchers. Close to midnight, shadows moved through the street, small, quick, barefoot. Apache children walking in silence. One by one, they placed flat stones in a circle around the jail, perfect, even complete. They left before morning came, but the stones remained. The floor creaked just past midnight. The sheriff turned sharp from his chair, one hand already reaching for the rifle beside the door, but no sound followed, only a breath light thin. Not his own, he rose slow. Stepped into the narrow back hall, where moonlight spilled through the roof slats. The door to the holding cell still locked, the girl still asleep on the floor. One hand open beside her cheek, her braid pulled tight beneath her shoulder. He moved further in, stopped cold. A boy stood near the back wall, small, barefoot, dark eyes wide and steady, hair cut short and rough. No weapon? No sound. Dust clung to his legs, cloth tunic marked with soot. He did not flinch when the sheriff stepped closer. The boy looked towards the girl, then reached into the small satchel at his hip, pulled out something wrapped in hide string, unrolled it careful in both hands. Wood, dark carved, smooth in some places, rough in others. The sheriff squinted, then froze. It was a figure. His figure. The coat, the jawline, even the scar above the collarbone. The sheriff's breath caught in his chest. He stepped back. The girl stirred, eyes opening. She saw the boy, sat up without a word. He walked to the bars, held the carving toward her. She reached out. Fingers touched the wood, paused. The sheriff spoke, voice low. Not to the girl, not to the boy, but to something behind his own ribs. He had seen that face before. Not the boy's, the mother's. Years ago, on a ridge where the fire had already eaten half the camp, he had pulled one child away, left another. A woman had screamed. Not in English, not in anything he understood, but he had known exactly what she meant. She had clawed at his sleeves. He had torn free, mounted fast, rode without looking back. That boy had not made it out. He had heard about the bones later, charred and nameless. Now this one stood silent, still offering a piece of him, carved in quiet hands. The sheriff looked away. The girl reached through the bars, took the carving, held it to her chest. The boy turned, walked toward the rear exit. Door creaked open, creaked shut. Then nothing. The sheriff sat down behind the desk. The badge still lay near the edge. Dented, smudged. He picked it up, turned it once in his hand, watched the moonlight catch the worn steel. Then he set it down in the center of the desk, flat face up, and did not touch it again. The knock came just after dawn, hard twice. Then the door pushed open before any answer came. 3 men entered, dust still on their coats, spurs sharp against the floorboards, the town council. None of them smiled. The sheriff stood slowly, arms loose at his sides, eyes steady. They did not sit. They spoke at once. Said the crowd outside was ready. Said every man had a rifle. Said the women were frightened. Said the jail was a spark sitting in dry grass. The sheriff listened, waited, then said, "If you shoot first, none of us leave." The youngest councilman laughed, said the Apache would scatter. The sheriff did not move, said nothing at first, just walked to the front window, looked through the narrow slit. The hills were full. Figures crouched behind every rise, sunlight on metal. Still watching his fingers, tightened on the wood, then loosened. He spoke low, said he had seen what came next. Once in the south, pass. A patrol fired first. Just 1 round. A warning, they said. By the end, 4 children dead. 1 rifle bent in half by the heat. The rest buried beneath cairns with no names. He had carried 1 of them. Too small to weigh that much, but heavy all the same. He had felt the ribs through the shirt, felt the blood soak through his sleeves. He had heard no cries, only the silence of a throat that could not scream any more. He had buried that one himself. The councilman did not answer. They looked at the badge on the desk, looked at each other, then turned, left without another word. The sheriff closed the door behind them, pressed his forehead to the frame. Eyes shut. 1 breath, then another. He turned. The girl was standing, hands at her sides, hair still tied. She looked at him, then spoke, soft, firm, not English. The sound stopped him mid-step. The midwife apprentice sat near the cell wall. She looked up, eyes wide. She translated. She says, "She is not alone." The sheriff stared at her. Not alone. Not now. Not ever. He stepped forward, but the moment shattered. A scream tore through the street, a sharp panic. Then the crack of a rifle. Not a drum. Not firewood. Not warning a shot fired. The sheriff turned fast. Hand already reaching boots, striking the floor. Outside, someone shouted. Then running. Then more voices rising. The girl did not move. Her eyes stayed on the door. The sheriff reached it, threw the bolt back. Another cry split the air before he could open it fully. The first torch hit with a flat thud. It rolled down the shingles, left a trail of flame behind it. By the time it struck the gutter beam, the fire had taken hold. The sheriff burst through the door, smoke already in the rafters. He shouted once. The girl stood. The midwife apprentice backed away with her hands up. The sheriff ran to the side room, unlocked the trap door near the grain sacks, kicked it open. Dirt air rose up from below. The basement was shallow and dry. No water, no tools. Only a crawl space from the old bootlegging days. He pointed to it. Then at the girl. She hesitated, then moved, dropped down without a word. Another torch came through the front window. Glass shattered. Flames licked across the curtain. The midwife pulled her shawl across her mouth and ran back toward the storeroom. The sheriff turned. The deputy stood in the corner, rifle raised, pointed through a crack in the boards. The sheriff shouted, "No shot yet. Still time." The deputy growled back, said they were surrounded, said he would not wait to die. The sheriff moved fast, knocked the barrel aside. The shot went high, punched through the roof and out the far wall. Smoke thickened, voices outside shifted. Still no bullets returned. The sheriff grabbed the rifle, tossed it down the trapdoor, told the girl to move deeper. He could barely see her now. Just her outline crouched in the dark. More torches landed, one on the back stair, one through the roof itself. A beam cracked overhead. Splinters fell. The walls hissed, oil in the wood catching fire with a low roar. The deputy staggered, eyes wild. The sheriff pushed him toward the trapdoor, said nothing. He knelt to follow, stopped. The ceiling above the front desk buckled, then collapsed. Half the roof came down in a single crashing roar. Flame and timber slammed into the entry hall. Smoke surged forward. The main exit vanished in red and black. The path to the door was gone. The sheriff covered his head, felt heat sear across his sleeves. Ash filled his throat. He crawled backward, fell through the trap opening just as another rafter gave way. He rolled onto the dirt floor below, gasping, coughing. The deputy lay on his back beside the wall, covered in dust. The girl stood still in the far corner, face streaked with soot, but eyes clear. The sheriff looked up. Smoke poured through the square of light above, the trapdoor frame now lit from behind. The jail was burning from the top down, and they were sealed inside. The roof creaked again, then groaned, then waited. Not long now. Not long at all. The air inside the crawl space burned the back of his throat. Ash drifted like snow in the beam of firelight above. The girl pressed a cloth to her mouth. The deputy crouched with his back against the wall, eyes shut, mouth open. Silent, the sheriff blinked hard, cleared his lungs, looked toward the far end of the crawl space there. A shape moved small, quick, half hidden in smoke. The boy had returned. No sound came from his steps, no cough from his chest. He raised one hand, beckoned once, then turned. The sheriff followed. The tunnel was tighter there. Timbers slanted. One had cracked and sagged across the path. He dropped to his elbows, dragged himself through. The earth tasted like soot. Rough, dry dead behind him. The girl moved quiet. He could hear her hands brushing stone, but no fear in her breath. They passed beneath a sagging joist, then into open dark. The boy had stopped. Beside a rusted chute, old iron rails led downward at an angle. Once used to haul coal from the back storage, now abandoned. The boy slipped through the opening, gone in an instant. The sheriff lowered himself, slid feet first, felt rust tear across his boots. Gravity caught him. He landed hard in a dirt pit with broken planks and weeds. He stood fast, looked up. The girl hesitated at the top. She turned once, looked behind her toward the smoke-filled passage, then she dropped, hit the ground without a sound, rose, without help. The sheriff turned. They stood behind the old chapel. The round stone well to their right, dry cracked, used now for nothing but shade. Beside it stood the midwife apprentice, holding a rope in one hand, a horse in the other. Its flanks streaked with foam, its eyes wide. She ran to the girl, grabbed her hands, checked her arms, pulled her close without words. The sheriff looked around. No sign of the deputy. He checked the alley, checked the lot behind the chapel, checked the path leading toward the ridge. Nothing, only wind and dust. The boy stood apart from them. Beside the edge of the shade, still eyes forward. He raised one hand, palm up. The sheriff followed his gaze. At the far end of the street, between the last two buildings, a figure stood. Tall, unmoving, wrapped in hide face hidden by shadow. The sun caught on something in his hands. Metal glinted, sharp long. A rifle pointed straight at them. The girl stepped closer. The boy stayed still. The sheriff did not breathe. The figure did not move. Not yet, but soon. The wind passed slow between buildings. Dust lifted in soft curls across the empty road. The rifle did not move. High above them on the roofline, a figure lay flat, elbows planted, scope steady, one eye shut tight, finger resting on the trigger guard. He had followed since the fire, watched the smoke, waited. Now the crosshairs sat still on the sheriff's chest. Center mass. No shake, no breath, just silence. The sheriff did not flinch. His eyes stayed forward, locked on the figure in the distance. He knew what it meant. He had felt it before. That stillness before the end. The girl stood beside the midwife, hands at her sides. Not hiding, not fleeing. The boy moved slightly, stepped once toward the open street, his presence small, but not invisible. A sound carried low from the ridge, not a shout, not a warning, a single word, spoken in the old tongue. The sniper heard it, body tensed, trigger finger twitched once, then stilled. He exhaled, slow, long. Then lowered the barrel off target, let it rest against the rooftop tiles. Down on the street, the figure at the far end stepped back into the crowd. Shapes shifted, forms moved aside. The Apache ring parted from its center. A woman stepped forward, barefoot hair braided with white thread, cloth worn at the knees from kneeling, her face marked with ash. One hand pressed to her chest, the other loose at her side. She did not run. She walked. Every footfall struck quiet against the earth. She passed between elders and warriors. No one stopped her. The girl stepped forward. The sheriff looked between them. He did not speak. He did not need to. He walked to the horse, loosened the reins, held them out. The girl did not take them. She looked at the animal, then at her mother. She stepped around the sheriff, did not touch him, did not pause. She walked. Her mother met her halfway, put a hand on the side of her face, touched the braid. They did not speak. They turned together and kept walking. The boy followed behind, carving still in hand. The midwife watched until they were halfway across the square, then turned and walked the other direction. The sheriff stood alone, horse at his side, badge still on the desk in the burning jail behind him. The sniper rose from the rooftop, lowered the rifle across his back, disappeared from view. The dust settled again, and nothing moved for a long time. The sheriff walked alone down the main road, boots soft against the scorched earth. No sound behind him, no sound ahead. The street held its breath. Shutters cracked open just wide enough for eyes. Mouths spoke nothing. Hands rested on door frames, still half gripping, half letting go. The general store door hung half open, the bell above it silent. The saloon windows smeared with smoke from the night's fire. The bell tower above the chapel did not ring. The sheriff passed them all without turning his head. His shirt was torn, soot marked the folds across his back. One sleeve burned through near the elbow. The left boot dragged faintly with each step. He reached the edge of town where the river cut shallow through dry stone. Bent low knees cracking, palms to water. The mud rose dark around his fingers, black from ash, red from something older. He scrubbed slow. Let the water carry flakes of burned timber downriver. Rinsed again, then sat back on his heels. The sky held no clouds, only light, only silence. She came without sound. The midwife apprentice knelt across from him, her apron smeared with dust, face streaked where tears had dried. She said what needed saying. They voted. It was not close. The council had spoken. He was no longer sheriff. He nodded once, not slow, not fast, just enough. He looked down at his hands, open raw in places, clean now but not healed. He stood. She did not follow. He walked back up the slope, past the cottonwood stump, past the dry trough, into the shell of the jail. The roof was gone. Smoke still drifted between the beams. Heat lingered in the stones. Ash clung to the window frames. The desk still stood, charred along one side. He stepped to it. The badge rested where he had left it, unmoved, unclaimed. He looked at it a long while, then turned. He did not touch it, did not take it with him. Outside, the sky stretched wide. The wind picked up, moved through the streets like breath through hollow bones. The townsfolk watched from behind doors, from shadow, from behind their own silence. He walked through the square, past the well, past the church. His steps did not falter, did not slow at the far edge of town. The dust thinned, the path widened. He did not look back, not once. He walked until the noise of town faded, until the boards and brick were only shapes behind him, until the land stretched open again, until even the stones went quiet beneath his feet. And then he kept walking farther still. The jail stood quiet beneath the wide sun. Half the roof gone, timbers split and bleached. No boards nailed across the door, no signs posted. No law left to enforce. Children played near the steps. Bare feet in the dust, laughter soft and sharp as they chased each other through the dry grass. They did not whisper. They did not ask permission. No one stopped them. The stones from before remained worn by heat, shifted by time, but still there. A circle. Not perfect, not broken. Inside it, near the center, a single shape stood upright, carved from wood darkened by sun, edges worn smooth by wind, small enough to lift heavy, enough not to blow away a man's figure. Coat cut rough across the shoulders, one hand at his side, one pressed to his chest. No name carved beneath, no plaque, only presence. At the base of the carving rested a handful of ash, fine and gray, still settled in a shallow pile. Beside it, a badge faded, bent along one edge, still holding the 5 points, still catching light when the wind moved just right. No one spoke of who placed it there. No one claimed the carving. But those who passed the jail sometimes slowed, and those who remembered the fire always glanced once toward the circle. The children played through the heat. They hopped across the stones, ran along the side wall, tossed sticks that clattered against old brick. When they grew tired, they sat in the shade near the well, whispered stories in the old tongue. Some pointed to the carving, some touched it. None moved it by midday. The dust had lifted again, wind soft, low, steady. It stirred around the circle, kicked at the edges of the ash, pressed against the folds of the badge, lifted dirt from the cracks in the stone. The figure did not tip, did not shift, did not bow. It stood still as the memory it held. Still as the silence that followed a fire long past. The wind blew once more, then settled. The jail did not fall. The stones did not scatter. The carving did not move. It remained, and the land watched it without a sound. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, and comment on the Old Western Tales.